Welcome to Kaizen Time, part of the Blood, Sweat, and Business podcast, where we provide constant improvement to businesses through timely, actionable financial solutions. Do you want answers to your financial questions? Email us at bsp@kaizencpas.com. I'm your host, Mark Valesky. Now let's get started. Welcome to another episode of Kaizen Time. I am joined by Adam and Ian with our Kaizen Risk Management team. How you doing, guys?
Doing pretty good.
Awesome. Excited to be here.
Well, I'm glad you're excited because we're going to be talking about something that you guys work on a lot. Yeah. That is workers' comp. First off, what is it? Why should anyone really care?
You ready to get started? Buckle in. Some really exciting stuff. I
got my buckle on.
All right.
This chair here.
Cool.
Yeah.
At its core, workers' comp, protects your employees from injuries and illnesses that they get if working at your place of business.
Okay.
Essentially. So it's regardless of fault, which is very important to know. So regardless if it was your fault, regardless if it's their fault, if they get injured, there's going to be coverage to pay for their medical costs and lost wages, things like that, to make sure that they're well taken care of if those things happen.
Okay.
It's important to know that the injury has to happen in the course of their job and at their job too. So, and it could be like an illness too. So one example for an injury, let's say a convenience store worker is arrived at their job at their assigned time, and they trip over a display, and they break their leg. Mm-hmm. So that would be like an example of no matter who put up that display, no matter how the accident happened, they're going to be covered.
Okay.
As well, like an illness. So let's say it's like a factory worker who doesn't have they work there for 10 years and they develop a hearing loss. That is also
that would be connected to something with work, right?
Because let's say the factory machines were loud,
right?
And then that developed hearing loss. So that would also be like a protected illness, or
So at its core, it protects your employees. Obviously, you want your employees to be protected if something like that were to happen. But the other side of it is it also protects you from lawsuits.
And when you say you, it means the business as a whole, right?
Correct. So if they use workers' comp, if they're injured, they have to use workers' comp, and then they really can't sue you for that injury. So it's going to kind of take all of that process out of the courtrooms. So it saves a lot of court costs, a lot of time on both ends.
Okay. Real quick, for like a brick and mortar where they have people in their business, right? Let's say it's a bakery. Does workers' comp cover that?
You mean people as in employees or people as in customers?
Customers. Is that completely different? All right.
Completely different. Well, there's coverage for that, obviously, but it's not workers' comp.
I just wanted to make that very clear. Yep. So that is great to know. So there is a legal requirement, right? This is required. So this is on a federal level?
State regulated.
Okay, so every state's different, but every state requires it.
At some level, yes.
Okay.
So
there's one state, Texas.
Texas doesn't necessarily require it. But.
Right.
Good old Texas. Okay.
Yeah, the one state, right?
But you still want it because if you don't have it, there's specific things that could happen where you're going to be, liable to pay for quite a bit of the injuries anyway. Mm-hmm. But based on the state rules, most of the states are going to require if you have at least one employee, you're going to need workers' comp.
Even if they're part-time.
Well, so give me some examples of the tiers. Okay, if I'm in Texas, I'm probably here, right? If I'm in Illinois or whatever, what are we kind of looking at for coverage and such?
For price?
Not just for price, but specifically, is there certain levels? Hey, this certain level of workers' comp covers more, or you get certain.
I got what you're saying.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. I mean, with workers' comp, in terms of covering employees, it's unlimited amount of coverage for an employee's injury.
Okay.
In terms of tiers, which ones you could. It depends on employer liability. So as we mentioned, workers' comp takes, it makes it so that we don't have to go to the courts to dispute any claims that have happened with an employee. But sometimes an employer could be found negligent with let's say they have a wire hanging and they never addressed it. They never.
So we're talking almost OSHA kind of stuff where there's so that's not a safe place to work. Right.
So then in that case, the employer could have coverage of $100,000 per accident, $500,000. I'm not really remembering the exact coverage limits, but I know the the highest one, you have $1 million for injury, $1 million for disease and diseases that are brought up by an employee, and then overall $1 million for like.
Okay, so my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is the kind of the base level for workers' comp is, hey, we'll cover you, and it covers the person, for the entirety or duration of that illness, injury, or whatever. Hey, you lose an arm, we're gonna cover that for your entire life, right? It covers the incident, but there is another tier above that would protect you in case of potential negligence, or maybe it's a really hazardous job, right? And you want that extra level of protection?
Yes and no. So there's not necessarily, so every workers' comp policy is going to include both of those things. It's going to cover the employee, and you're also going to have protection for a potential but rare case where the lawsuit's brought against you. But there are state-specific regulations for like, okay, your injury is covered, your medical costs, but then certain states may have differences in how much you could get for lost wages, for disability, whether that's long-term, short-term. So those are best in this times of claims, kind of how that happens. But those are state regulated and those cannot be changed.
Can you give me a quick snapshot of what Illinois requires? Because that's where we are and that's where a lot of our clients are.
I think Ian mentioned it, even if it's part-time or full-time, you have one employee, even if it's family, you have to have a workers' comp policy, and failure to do that is going to result in pretty hefty fines.
Okay. How hefty is hefty?
It depends on the situation, but it can get pretty hefty.
So what you're saying, and would that also correlate with how many employees, right? Like, hey, you have 200 employees and they're not covered, as opposed to like just one.
I would hope that never happens. Right?
If you got up to 200 employees, you probably should have had this a long time ago, right?
Yeah. And then it also could, stop you from getting workers' comp at a decent price going forward too. So there's it's a lot can happen for from not having like proper coverage in place. Okay.
So really this is something when you start, you should really just have it. You're saving yourself some effort. Just get it and then keep it going. I'm guessing the price of workers' comp goes up per employee you have, right?
Yeah.
It's definitely a cost factor. Yeah, the number of employees.
Do you want to get into kind of how that works?
Yeah, sure.
All right, cool.
We don't need to get into the exact numbers, but just give me like.
I mean, I can give you a range, right? So, like for example, if you have one employee, you could be paying $30 a month.
$30 a month seems really cheap.
It is,
and compared to a lot of the other things I pay per month, right?
Yeah. Exactly, especially with the types of coverage you get. Like your employees can be protected up to the limit of their illness or injury, so it could be hundreds of thousands of dollars you're getting for having that in place. So what goes into the cost basically is like kind of like you mentioned, your payroll amount, like the amount of payroll you have is going to go into the total cost. Also, what your job does, so like what are your operations. How risky is that? And also what your employees do, what are their jobs? So obviously if an accounting firm has $100,000 worth of payroll, their cost is going to be lower than a roofing company that has $100,000 worth of payroll, because as statistics have shown, a roofing company, the employees there are much more likely to get injured than an accountant who's sitting at a desk doing some computer work. Now, where price it kind of becomes interesting is it's kind of set in stone. It's like the states are going to usually control what rates you're going to pay for the types of employees you have, but there are things you can do to make sure you can control your cost.
Tell me.
So like claims is really going to be important. So the price that you're going to pay is going to compare your company to maybe a similar company with the same classifications. Like if you're doing very similar work. So two roofing companies can be compared. If one has a bunch of claims, you shouldn't be paying as much as you who have done everything you can to make sure there are no claims.
So do they end up comparing those numbers with like, someone who's similar, or is this, but is it also like, with my car insurance, right? Like if I get into a bunch of accidents, my rate goes up automatically.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So like your car insurance, however, if you put an alarm in your car, you're going to have a discount because it's less likely to have a break-in. So before you have any claims, you can implement things. And we actually work with our customers to do this. Something as simple as having first aid on hand, like a first aid kit on hand, can lower your policy as long as you have the right broker to have those conversations.
I've had that too. Like health insurance. They said, if your employees stretch every day, right? They were really, adamant about that. So we do that and it lowered the rate, and
I was able to give a customer a 10% decrease in the price because they look at ergonomics and they have like a specific guide on how to, and they train the new employees how to sit properly at their desks. So I was able to give them a 10% decrease in their price just because of that. And a lot of times you you don't even know those exist, or the brokers don't mention it because it's a lower price, lower commission, things like that. So, we make sure we not only mention it, but help implement certain things and give guidance
brilliant.
on how to do that. Yeah, it's
Brilliant.
pretty cool.
Well, that pretty much wraps it up for workers' comp.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you guys feel like is really important that we just kind of skipped over?
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
I mean, for the most part, it seems pretty cut and dry, but
Yeah.
it is. I mean, you guys do this all day. It's probably one of the most essential things that you guys offer.
Like if you have a business, most people know they need workers' comp.
Yeah.
However, not a lot of people understand what goes into workers' comp, why it's required, and really what your benefits are. So if there's any questions, it's good to talk to your broker or your insurance agent to kind of see how you can reduce your price, make sure you have the right coverages in place, and make sure your business is classified properly to make sure the price is accurate.
Well, that's fabulous. Thank you so much, guys.